may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, so something we talk about all the time here is chasing upside, 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 upside. And really, you don't need to be worrying about your floor in fantasy football, because it doesn't matter if you were playing DFS. It doesn't matter if you're playing redraft or dynasty. I mean, the easiest way to view fantasy football is through the lens that you have an expected outcome every single time you enter a contest, whether or not that's a large field tournament, whether or not that's a 12-man league, but you have to understand the baseline of your win rate and what you should expect it to be. And if you go through and do some simple math, you go, okay, so if we're playing in a 12-man league and we are obviously only having one entry here, you're going to naturally assume that your base rate to win your league is going to be hovering around 8.5%. So everything that you do is not to protect that 8.5%. What you do is you try to make sure you can push that as high as you can, because if you play to make sure you're not going to be the worst team in the league, well, congrats, you're not going to be 12th, but you're damn sure not going to be first. You have to do everything that you can to be chasing that upside. So there's going to be a lot of strategy going into that, which of course we'll dive into. But before we do that, I do have to come out here and I have to make a correction. I said that the official Flock meetup was July 19th, and that is incorrect. It's June 19th. I am very sorry for misspeaking, but we are having an official Flock meetup in Austin, Texas, June 19th, which is a Saturday at Jester King Brewery. Now, please, guys, if you can make it, make it. I am going to be moving to Florida this summer, so if you want to meet not only myself, but also a lot of other people that really enjoy fantasy football and like the channel, this is going to be your one shot. So please, please, please save the date, and I would love to meet you out there. But that's it. So let's go through and let's try to identify some of these very cheap running backs that have access to that elite level upside. And the easiest way to do this is going to be looking at the running backs that don't project to see opportunity right away. So not the David Montgomery, not the Najee Harris, not the guy like Derrick Henry, that you understand that there's going to be an expectation that that running back should see 250 touches this upcoming season. No, we are going to be trying to target the players that don't necessarily have that projected opportunity right away, but it is in the range of outcomes for them to kind of swing your league if they can get vaulted up to their starting lineup. So here, with those handcuffed running backs, what I want to focus in on is making sure that we're identifying the guys that we believe have the potential to turn into bell cow type running backs if the player ahead of them is injured. Now, this was seen last year with a Mike Davis and Christian McCaffrey. This was seen also with Leonard Fournette getting traded, and then all of a sudden, James Robinson is a league-winning running back. I mean, this happens literally every single season. It's happened since fantasy football started, and it will happen for the next 100 years or for however long the NFL is going through. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be saying, well, Mason, just draft the backup to whoever you drafted in the first or second round. And that's the exact opposite of what you want to do. Like we discussed at the beginning of the video, you are not trying to protect your 8.5% win rate. What you are trying to do is you are trying to expand on that. So understanding that 11 out of the 12 teams in your league are going to lose the league, just say, hey, I draft Alvin Kamara in the first round. If Alvin Kamara goes down, yeah, it's nice to have Latavius Murray, but the expectation is you're going to be losing your league regardless. I mean, you almost need everything to go right. Talk to the Christian McCaffrey owners last year. Talk to the Saquon Barkley owners last year. Ensure once in a blue moon, they're still able to pull out a win on the season out of their ass. I mean, if everything breaks right for them. But a way more likely scenario is when you're discussing handcuffing these running backs and say you're the team that drafted Alvin Kamara in the first round. And you went through and you went, you know what? We drafted Kamara, but let's not focus in on Latavius Murray. Instead, let's go draft Mike Davis. That way, if the Christian McCaffrey owner suffers that injury, we are all of a sudden going to have two running back ones on our roster, and that 8.5% expected win rate is going to skyrocket. That's what you want to be doing. You want to be targeting the guys that aren't necessarily the backups on your own team, but the backups on other teams instead. So let's go through some players that I think have access to that elite upside. And the first guy a lot of people are going to point to is going to be Tony Pollard. Now, it's no secret that Tony Pollard is the highest drafted handcuff in almost every single format, season after season. But here, if you go through the profile, I honestly think there's reason to believe that Tony Pollard is maybe one of the most overvalued handcuffs, because you go through and yes, he is being drafted earlier than all of these other guys. I mean, sometimes you see him in the late 8th in a 2021 redraft league. Sometimes he falls down into the early 9th, but very rarely are you going to be getting Tony Pollard in the double-digit rounds, at least what we have seen from 2021 redraft leagues so far. And here with Tony Pollard, I mean, yes, only 24 years old, yes. What you love to see is you love to see that he is an elite pass-catching running back. I mean, there are very few pass-catching running backs that are not having an every down role that are as talented as Tony Pollard in the NFL. And also, he has great speed. I mean, he ran a 4.41 at his pro day coming into the NFL. But the problem is with Tony Pollard, he doesn't necessarily have the requisite BMI for you to expect him to be able to handle a workhorse type role. If you saw an Ezekiel Elliott injury to start the season, then you'd be looking at Tony Pollard definitely as a running back too. I mean, this is someone that with his pass catching ability, he is going to be someone making your starting lineup every single week. But if we go through and we look at Tony Pollard, I mean, what kind of sucks is we have not had an opportunity to really see what he would be like if he was the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys. We only have one game to look at. And in this one game, I understand a lot of people remember how impressive it was. I know that everybody pretty much won money if you played him in DFS this week. But if you go to 2020 in week 15, this is a week that Ezekiel Elliott did miss. And here, Tony Pollard had 12 carries, but more importantly, 9 targets. That's what you love to see. 69 rushing yards, 63 receiving yards, 132 total yards, and 2 total touchdowns. So I know a lot of people are going to remember this and go, hey, he was getting used in both running the football as well as being the receiving target out of the backfield. And he was highly efficient, and he came through with a massive performance, scoring over 30 fantasy points. But I want to focus in on the fact that you didn't see him come close to 20 carries. You did not see Tony Pollard really turn into a Ezekiel Elliott clone. So for that reason, I'm viewing him more so as a player that has the upside to being a mid to high end running back too, which is still extremely valuable. But if you wait and just listen to some of the other running backs on this list, I think for a cheaper price, you can find some players with even more upside. So for that reason, Tony Pollard isn't necessarily going to be my favorite guy here. So if we go down and we talk about our next guy in Alexander Mattison, this is where we start to get to the cheaper running backs, because we already talked about Tony Pollard. You're going to be spending an 8th or 9th round pick on him. But here with Alexander Mattison, he's actually going in the 13th round, which is a significant difference. I mean, you can save that 9th round pick. You can take your wide receiver 4 on your roster, someone that's most likely going to be playing in the flex spots every single week. And here with Alexander Mattison, you're just getting that lotto ticket. I mean, he goes through and he checks a lot of the same boxes that you have with the Tony Pollard. I mean, he's only 22 years old. He is about to be 23, but you definitely prefer seeing a running back a little younger, because we know that you see the fall off at the running back position happen a lot earlier than wide receiver. Then you check his BMI for his size and his 3-down capability on handling that workload. And here he has the requisite BMI you look for. I mean, he's at 30.8. And I know a lot of people are probably a little confused when we're talking about these boxes, but I highly advise you to check out our rookie draft guide, where we identify what a top 12 running back looks like at the next level based on their collegiate measurables. So please make sure you check that out. I provide a ton of historical research behind that, but if you don't want to, fine, just trust me on this one. He also was drafted at the very end of the 3rd round in the 2019 draft, and he did meet the minimum threshold on his speed, where he ran a 4.60. So yes, he's right at the threshold, but at the very minimum, you do like to see it. And more importantly, what you like to see is you like to see in 2020 Alexander Mattison, the very small sample that we do have of him actually getting to be a starting running back was in week 17 when there was no Dalvin Cook. And here from Alexander Mattison, you have 21 carries, you have 3 receptions, 145 total yards, and 2 total touchdowns. So this is what you're looking for. This is the exact profile that you want. You want someone that can catch the ball. You want someone that has the size to be a 3-down guy if the running back ahead of him goes down. And also, he's playing in an offense that has an above-average offensive line, and we have seen time and time again that this team wants to be run-heavy. Mike Boone goes over to Denver, so this running back backfield is even a little less crowded than it was before in the case of a Dalvin Cook injury. Now, if you go to 2019, he never played with Dalvin Cook, so it's going to be really hard to look at anything from that season. But here is a perfect example of, I know everybody wants to focus in on Tony Pollard as that elite handcuff running back because people remember playing Tony Pollard in the fantasy playoffs. People remember making a lot of money with Tony Pollard. Well, Alexander Mattison did the same thing in week 17, but because it was week 17, nobody's really paying that mind. So please don't be drafting Tony Pollard in the 8th or the 9th. Wait until you get down to the 13th. And that's the point where you can draft Alexander Mattison, have a running back that has access to similar type upside at a very low cost. Now, someone who has been absolutely absurd when he's got an opportunity in the past is going to be Latavius Murray. And now here with Latavius Murray, I actually really like him in best ball compared to these other guys because out of everybody on this list, he is the one running back that is definitely going to have a role even when Alvin Kamara is healthy. Now, the one thing you hate to see is the fact that Latavius Murray is 31 years old. I mean, it's going to be hard to overlook that, but he has been effective over the past few years. So in 2020, obviously, Alvin Kamara plays every game. We really don't get to see Latavius Murray. But with that being said, he did manage to score 9 points per game, which is why I'm referencing him as a decent best ball option, because obviously you're never going to be wanting to plug him in if you're playing in a standard format where you're having to submit a starting lineup when Alvin Kamara is healthy. But for best ball, I mean, this is someone that could have a random spike week, even when Alvin Kamara is healthy, of coming away with 2 rushing touchdowns. So you do like to see that potential, and you do like to see that he has a role on the offense, even with Alvin Kamara in there. But more importantly, and this is the number one thing I want to point to, is 2019. We saw 2 weeks where Alvin Kamara missed, and Latavius Murray stepped up into that feature down role. Now, in these 2 weeks, Latavius Murray was absurd. I mean, he was outproducing Alvin Kamara. Definitely not a better running back than Alvin Kamara, but if you understand, you take one running back out of the backfield, I mean, the opportunity is going to be sky high for the other guy. So here in 2019, I mean, those 2 weeks, you had week 7 and week 8. And in week 7, Latavius Murray had 27 carries, 5 receptions for a total of 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, I know a lot of people don't necessarily view Latavius Murray as a pass-catching running back, and that's mainly because Alvin Kamara is that elite guy, so Latavius Murray never even gets a chance to be running routes whenever Alvin Kamara is healthy. But if you go to week 8, I mean, this is absurd. In week 8, Latavius Murray has 21 carries, 9 receptions with no Alvin Kamara. 21 carries, 9 receptions, 157 yards, and 2 total touchdowns as well. So here with Latavius Murray, I mean, he has been the number 1 handcuff running back if anything would have happened to Alvin Kamara over the past 2 years. Sadly, you really only get 2 of those weeks back in 2019. The question is, does he still have the same kind of juice? It's really hard to see because he is 31 years old. He doesn't really play an every down role, so it's going to be hard to say. But if you think he is anything close to what he was back in 2019, I mean, this is a running back with elite potential if anything happened to Alvin Kamara, and he's very similar to Alexander Mattison. I mean, he's going in the late 13th round compared to Tony Pollard in the 8th or the 9th. I mean, you really have to like that price. Now, let's go down to a guy that, I mean, is going a lot later than this, and honestly, I like him almost just as much. It's going to be Chuba Hubbard. And Chuba Hubbard's going to be a little bit of a different evaluation here because we haven't had a chance to go through and see him at the NFL level yet. But we can naturally assume that this is a player that's unlike Latavius Murray and that he's not going to have a role any given week that Christian McCaffrey's healthy. I mean, you can safely expect, even with the injuries this past season, that Christian McCaffrey's going to be a player seeing 80% of the snaps at the minimum in Carolina. So here with Chuba Hubbard, I mean, you're looking at him as mainly just a prospect coming into the NFL. And with that being said, a prospect that does not check a lot of boxes, but everything needs context behind it. And that's what we need to talk about with Chuba Hubbard. So here, Hubbard doesn't check the size, and we never really expected him to check the size box. He comes in with a BMI of 28.2, so he really doesn't look like he has that potential to turn into a bell cow type running back like a James Robinson or Mike Davis did last year. Also, Chuba Hubbard doesn't get the team investment. He gets drafted in the middle of the 4th round, which you definitely don't want to see from a prospect. But what you mainly look for with that draft capital is you're not necessarily trying to evaluate the talent level of a player. You're mainly trying to look at the opportunity that they're going to get at the next level. So here, the draft capital with Chuba Hubbard is a little less important because we already understand he's playing on a team that has Christian McCaffrey. I mean, if Christian McCaffrey's healthy, it's not like Chuba Hubbard's going to be getting a single touch regardless. So we can overlook that slightly. And I know if you go to his pro day numbers, you're not going to be blown away at this speed. I mean, it's still above average, but I want to focus in on here with Chuba Hubbard that this is a player that is an elite athlete. He has elite level speed. I mean, this was someone that had the chance to go to the Olympics. I mean, he was a junior track star. So I think if you just look at what we had previously seen with Chuba Hubbard, how he was a Heisman finalist back in 2019, he was a Heisman favorite going into 2020, and all of a sudden, he just has a complete fall off. We know that there's some off the field concerns with what was going on with him and his coach, but nonetheless, I think maybe you see COVID and everything that was going on in 2020 skew Chuba Hubbard a little bit. And trust me, I am the last person to let people use these as excuses, whether it's real life, whether it's fantasy football. I hate to hear it was 2020. It's a weird year. That's a crappy excuse. And I've never heard it. And you're probably never going to hear me say it, except in the case of Chuba Hubbard. And I could be completely wrong here. If you think I'm wrong, please let me know in the comment section. But I'm looking at it as going, how does a player go from being a Heisman finalist, being a literal track star, to all of a sudden putting up a dud in 2020 and not showing us off that speed? And you have the context in what was going on with his coach. And I think Chuba Hubbard maybe just wasn't all in on football in 2020. I think you see Matt Rule go out, Matt Rule, a former Big 12 coach, and goes, hey, I know the kind of player Chuba Hubbard is. Let's take him in the 4th. Maybe we can get him back on track. Maybe we can turn him back into the running back that he was at Oklahoma State. And if that's the case, this is someone with upside. Now, if you go through the depth chart, I mean, you have Christian McCaffrey at the top. Obviously, he's going to be taking every touch. But behind that, you have nobody. Mike Davis goes to Atlanta. So at this point, you have Chuba Hubbard as the second running back. And then it's almost impossible to even say who the third guy is here. I mean, is it Trenton Cannon? I mean, I don't have that answer. All I know is if Christian McCaffrey goes down, you better be expecting a significant role for Chuba Hubbard. And if he can get back to what he was in 2019, this is a player with a ton of ceiling. Okay, so our last guy we are going to talk about was actually highly productive in 2020, Darrell Henderson. So you all know halfway through the year, we were getting so much hate on this channel for me coming out and saying, hey, Darrell Henderson, a player you need to be selling ASAP. Sell before they start to use Cam Akers. Cam Akers is still secretly rehabbing from that rib injury, and we are all aboard the sell Darrell Henderson train. And every single night in a live stream, every single comment on the YouTube channel was just, Mason, you bum. Darrell Henderson is the first graded running back in PFF. And I'm sitting here having to defend myself. Well, where are the Darrell Henderson fans now? Because I feel like I'm on the complete opposite side of the fence. And I'm looking at this ADP where he's a late 13th round pick. And I'm going, hey, this is a running back 2 on his roster that has a ton of potential. I mean, obviously, Cam Akers is the better running back, and when Cam Akers is healthy, you're not really going to be able to start Darrell Henderson. That's no secret. But what we saw last year is we saw when Darrell Henderson was active and when he was that starting running back, he was someone that could be efficient with his touches. He was someone that was impressive on a per-touch basis. Now, one of the problems was Malcolm Brown was kind of getting the receiving down usage for this offense. Well, I got news for y'all guys. Malcolm Brown is now in Miami. And also, you see a significant upgrade from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford as the quarterback for this team. So all of a sudden, just say Darrell Henderson, for whatever reason, gets vaulted up to being the running back 1 on this team again. I mean, I think that his floor is what happened in 2020. I think that he goes beyond that because there's really nobody else on this depth chart now that Malcolm Brown is gone and the overall offense should be more productive. So getting him in the 13th round is fantastic. I mean, we saw in 2020, I mean, he had a week with 20 carries. He had a week with 15. He had another with 14, another with 15. I mean, we have seen the volume before for Darrell Henderson. I think now he has a ceiling for even more. So I'm going to be taking the massive discount. I'm going to be taking him as a handcuff type player and really not thinking twice about it. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, if y'all did, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow. Thank you so much for everybody supporting the show. In John, Raymond, Jordan, Andrew, Walter, Dwayne, Evan, Eamon, Q, and Use the Nerd. Thank you guys.